Hi, all, and welcome to Plain Speaking Sanjiv episode 42. Today, I'm going to speak to you about airline pricing and why it is seemingly such a complicated subject, and why airlines seem to sometimes do things that don't make sense to the common man. For example, why do we have these flash sales where tickets are really cheap? Why do fares suddenly become very expensive towards the day before travel? Why don't airlines just have a simple flat fare, one size fits all fare, like you have for maybe soap in the market? A bar of soap is always one price. So today, let's spend some time to understand why airlines do things the way they do. The first thing to understand is that an airline seat, like a hotel room night, is the ultimate perishable commodity. You get one shot to sell that seat. Once a flight takes off, you cannot sell that seat again. Let's imagine now, just to understand this concept better, that you've got 100 airline seats on a tray, and you've got 100 bars of soap on another tray, side by side. You're holding them in your hand. Two trays, 100 airline seats, 100 bars of soap. Now, the thing is that you want to sell as many airline seats as possible before the flight departs, because once a flight goes, any empty seats cannot be sold tomorrow. That empty seat goes with the flight. But with the 100 bars of soap, if there's any soap that is not sold today, it can just go back into the storeroom and be sold again tomorrow. That same soap is still there tomorrow. It doesn't perish. It doesn't have an instant expiry. So because of that, you can have a fixed price for the bars of soap, because it doesn't all have to sell today. For the airline seat, if you have a fixed price and seats go empty, you lose that revenue forever. You don't get a chance to sell that seat again tomorrow. So the objective for airlines is to maximize the revenue and to try to sell as many seats as possible before the seats perish, which means before the flight takes off and you cannot sell that seat ever again. Now, if you put a fixed price for those 100 seats, those 100 airline seats, what would happen is that the fixed price would be too high for some people, so some people would never travel. And the fixed price would be too low for those who are traveling at the last minute, corporate travelers, etc. It would not be too low, but in the sense that they're willing to pay more, but they're just getting it very cheap. But the seats that would have otherwise been bought by leisure travelers and those seeking cheap fares will stay empty, because last minute travel is fairly inflexible. Those who are traveling, and last minute people don't typically say, hey, let's just go on a holiday. It happens very, very seldom. So by keeping a fixed price, you keep the fare too high for those who would have otherwise traveled. You cannot stimulate travel and fill those empty seats, those few seats that may go empty. And at the other end, you keep the fare too low to maximize your revenue. As a business, you need to maximize your revenue, and you're actually leaving consumer surplus on the table, where you're giving those who are willing to and able to pay a higher fare, you're giving them a great deal that they're not really asking for. It's just there. It's just they're getting it for free. So you end up with the aircraft then leaving with a fixed fare, with empty seats, and not being able to maximize revenue on the other end either. Now, if you imagine that the 100 seats on the tray, that you can put a price tag on each, and you can say, look, I want to, because pricing is a curve, I want to make sure that I price the curve in a manner that every seat on the tray sells before the flight leaves. So you can imagine that, look, based on historical patterns, there will be 20 people out of those 100 who are traveling at the last minute, the corporate travelers. They're fairly price inflexible, and you can charge your full fare for those, let's just say, the premium fare, the full fare. But on the other extreme, there are 20 seats that will never sell unless you really sell them at a discount, because basically there's a little bit too much capacity on the route, and those 20 seats are called distressed inventory or distressed capacity. So to sell those 20 seats, you need to stimulate traffic. You need to encourage people who might otherwise not travel or not travel by air to travel, and you keep those fares very low. And the way to do this right is you keep the low fares and you sell those seats, the distress inventory, in advance, at least 30 days out in advance. You have sales, etc., and you put enough inventory there to get rid of the distressed seats at those sale fares, because getting some revenue for those seats is better than those seats going empty. And then closer to the date of travel, you don't have these sales anymore, because closer to the date of travel, you're getting people who are now, the demand is less flexible, and you're getting people who are able to pay and are willing to pay a premium, so to speak, for the flexibility and luxury of being able to book at the last minute. So the proper revenue management scheme will always be on a slope where, if this is your travel date, The fare is low when it's much further away, and it keeps increasing as it approaches the travel date. And then ideally, you perfect the algorithm in such a manner that the last seat sells just before the plane takes off. And that way, you make sure that no seat is empty, and you make sure that the airline maximizes revenue. You also make a basket of fares available over time to customers so that people of different income levels or different pricing or purchasing power can all get the chance to travel. It's just that those who want the cheapest fares just have to plan in advance. So, in exchange for planning in advance, they get a great deal. And for those who want the luxury and flexibility of being able to book at the last minute, well, they pay a premium for that luxury and flexibility. At the end of the day, the aircraft goes full. Now, that is the right way to do it, and the way airlines try to do it is they look at historical travel patterns for that flight, for that time of day, for that route, for that month, season, whatever, for that day of week, and see typically how many seats go empty and how many seats sell at what price bands. And they keep optimizing the algorithm so that they maximize the chance of the aircraft going full, uh, filling every seat and giving every potential passenger an opportunity to buy a ticket on a flight, depending on how early they're willing to buy the ticket. So this actually is optimal not just for the airline to optimize their revenues, but it also gives the most deals to passengers and allows more people to fly because you're selling your empty seats at low prices in advance. So those who advocate that have one fixed price or have a price floor, all you're advocating is keep the average fare higher and have fewer people fly. You're actually taking away flying options from people. Now, the absolute worst thing to do in this scenario, which I've just described, is to keep your fares high when the date is far away from travel, and to drop the fares as you're getting closer to travel. And you see some airlines doing that, and that is absolutely suicidal. Because by keeping the fares high, 30 days out, 40 days out, whatever, when people who are looking for lowest fares and have flexibility in the travel dates, you're basically shutting them out because your fares are too high for them. And then as the date of travel comes closer, you start realizing the revenue management team starts realizing that, oh my God, my seats are still empty. And they start dropping fares. And by the time they start dropping fares, the leisure travelers can't anyway plan at the last minute usually because they need more time to plan the holidays, leave from office, etc. So all you're doing by dropping your fares at the last minute is giving those who are anyway going to travel and who are less price sensitive, you're just giving them a discount for no reason. You're destroying value. And those airlines that advertise, last minute deals are destroying the most value because you're basically encouraging people to not book early, to book at the last minute, and you're giving away pricing power to those who least need that. I mean, to corporates and others. Now, I'm not saying we should rip off corporates. All I'm saying is that they're willing to pay a premium for the flexibility and luxury of booking at the last minute, but you're giving them the lowest fares. Keeping the fares high and then dropping them on the day of travel or the day before travel is the most value destroying approach that any airline can take. And you see many airlines actually doing this and advertising this proudly. And the tragedy of doing this is not only are you keeping seats empty anyway, because by dropping at the last minute, you're not going to encourage too much stimulation. Not too many people are going to fly at the last minute. You're not only not being able to fill the empty seats too much, you're just giving away, free money to those who would have traveled in any case. But you're also forcing other airlines who have a better pricing mechanism to match you, because at the last minute when you drop fares and there's only a finite number of people who book at the last minute and you're dropping your fares, then you're stealing the last minute traffic away potentially because you've not planned properly and you have too many empty seats, and you're forcing other airlines to drop their fares. So there's a saying in the airline industry that airlines are held hostage to the stupidest competitor. And what that basically means is that because pricing is so transparent and so available to everybody, the actions of the least intelligent competitor in terms of pricing holds the others hostage and makes them follow the same behavior because of the competitiveness of the industry, and then destroys value for everybody. So again, keeping prices high early, dropping the last minute is the worst thing any airline can do. Finally, to counter the objection that some people have, that look, this is not right because sometimes you have to travel at the last minute because there's an emergency, and unfortunately sometimes death in the family or medical or whatever it is, and that's when you're keeping the fares high. We are not all business people, we're not all business travelers. We need to travel at the last minute because of a personal emergency. Well, I can tell you that most good airlines have these emergency fares, these compassionate fares. You need to call up the call center, explain the emergency or situation. prove it with some documentation. I can assure you that at least every airline that I've been involved in, where I've had a say, we have compassionate fares where we will give you a good fare. We will not charge you the full fare for your last minute emergency travel if you can document that it is a genuine emergency. Now, we don't always ask for the documentation. If God forbid, you're going for someone's funeral, we don't say send us documents in advance, but we do ask that, look, send us the documents, within 3 days or whatever, because we want to be compassionate, but at the same time, we don't want the system to be gamed. So there is a requirement for some documentation. So again, the key takeaways from this rather lengthy session is that the difference between selling 100 airline seats on a tray and 100 bars of soap on a tray is that an unsold airline seat will remain unsold forever, whereas the unsold soap on the bar of tray can be sold again tomorrow. It doesn't disappear if you don't sell it today. And the worst thing an airline can do is keep fares high when it is far away from date of travel and drop fares as you get closer to the date of travel, and then give special deals, last minute fares, on the date of travel. That is the most value destroying pricing mechanism any airline could follow. So hope this is helpful to you guys. And remember, airlines are not in the business of ripping anybody off. They're in the business of trying to obviously make a return, because it's a very capital intensive, very high cost industry. But they're also in the business of trying to make more people fly. And the way they do that is by giving the discounts to those who are willing to book early and give up some flexibility in exchange for the lower fare. And they charge the premium to those who value the flexibility of being able to book at the last minute, and they will expect to see a seat at the last minute, and they're willing to pay a premium for that. Another point which I want to mention in this rather long episode is that if you put a pricing cap, the opposite end of flat pricing, on one end you won't have the lowest fares to stimulate demand to fill the empty seats, but also at the other end you have the risk in peak season or on some peak travel dates where your seats sell out in advance, because you've got a fixed fare, and on a peak travel day, people will obviously book, and then those last minute travelers, business travelers, etc., will have no seat. So the question is it better to have a seat available on the last day at a higher fare, or to have no seat available because you put a price cap and then you don't even have the option of traveling? What is better? And I think the best is to let the market determine the pricing, let the fares fluctuate basis demand and supply, and let the last seat sell at the most premium fare, unless it's a compassionate situation, just before the plane takes off. And the final thought is, the reason why certain airlines have this suicidal pricing model of keep fares high in advance and drop closer to departure is because they have the wrong KPIs. They are measuring load factor. There are some airline boards that don't understand what revenue per ASK is and what yield management and revenue management is. They just look at average fare and they look at load factor. So to keep the average fare visually high, they don't want to show that they're doing sales, etc., in case they get asked too many questions. So they keep the fares high initially. And then as the travel date approaches, they start panicking because they know that the board is going to be looking at load factor and they can't be flying with too many empty seats, so they drop the seats at the last minute. And they explain it to the board by saying that, the fares were, we had tried to keep the fares high because we don't want to discount, but now the flight is going pretty light, so we have to drop fares. And the less sophisticated boards say, okay, we understand. But actually they are encouraging their very wrong behavior. By looking at load factor and looking at average fare, you get to the wrong conclusions. You have to look at the revenue per ASK, which is the mathematical product of load factor and fare, and as measured through yield. So yield times load factor gives you your revenue per ASK, and your single KPI should be maximize the revenue per ASK. I don't care about the load factor, I don't care about your fare or yield, I care about making the revenue per ASK, which is the multiplication of the two, the highest possible. So this is my longest episode so far, but it's a very complicated topic. I hope this has made sense, and see you again in the next day or two with episode 43. I still haven't made up my mind what that is. I normally decide the day before, or sometimes even a few minutes before, but there's so many topics to talk about that I'm sure that there'll be something interesting that we can discuss in my next episode as well.